So just to start off, I'll let you guys know just a little bit about who I am. I have been a Pathfinder since I was 10 years old. And so I've always enjoyed it, and it's an honor also to be able to now helping lead it. I currently live in Ohio. That's a state inside of the United States, and I help coordinate a lot of what goes on here with our adventures and with our Pathfinders. I'm the Pathfinder director for my local church. I assist a Spanish-speaking church. I am originally from Puerto Rico, so Spanish is my first language. I help coordinate the wiki, the answer book. Many of you guys might know it. You can go there to help find resources and materials. And I'm also a part of the AY Honors Committee for the North American Division. What that means is that I help develop or approve new honors for the North American Division. And usually we try and send those North American Division honors to the General Conference so that the entire world can go ahead and also be able to use those honors. So what we want to do for this session is we want to, of course, earn this new biosafety honor. We want to learn about the terms, or what different words mean. We want to learn about different diseases and sicknesses, where pandemics and outbreaks have occurred in the past, and different safety measures that we can take to make sure that we don't get sick ourselves. And of course, we want to discover what God is telling us in His Word about different diseases and illnesses. I'm going to go kind of quickly through the honor. There's only 18 requirements, but each requirement is so chock full of information. So, and we want to get through all of it so you guys can at least have an idea of what's going on. At the end of this presentation, remember, you can always go back and look at the presentation, and you can fill in whatever gaps you might have missed. So let's go ahead and start off with number one. And number one is simply to define the following terms. The first one is letter A, which is biosafety. I mean, we're taking the biosafety honor, so what does that mean? Well, biosafety generally is simply the discipline or the practice of handling safely things that can be infectious, microorganisms, or hazardous biological materials. So these are different procedures that are intended to protect people or animals against getting sick. So that's what biosafety is. It's making sure that you handle things that can get you sick in a safe way so that you don't actually become sick. B is biohazard. Now you can see a sign there that says danger biohazard. So when you see that danger biohazard, what does that mean? It's basically that there's something that can get you sick, something that's a biological substance that's dangerous. Lots of biohazards are usually considered things like bacteria or microscopic organisms. Some biohazards are an unintentional side effect of people who are working with toxins or viruses. They're trying to study it, and sometimes there might be an accident and there's a biohazard in the area. So a common type would be medical waste. So if you go to the hospital or to the doctor, lots of times they'll have bins that are designated medical waste. And these can include things like needles, syringes, or any other type of contamination that includes bodily fluids like blood, bacteria, or microorganisms. The word biohazard is actually a combination of two different types of words in different languages. The first one is bio, which is Greek for life. So if you take biology, that's the study of life. And the second part is hazard, which comes from an old French word, hazard, which means the game of chance. So it's basically like you're taking a chance on your life. That's what biohazard means. Letter C is risk factor. What is a risk factor? Well, a risk factor is basically anything that can increase your chance of getting sick. For example, you see there on the picture, someone smoking. This is a risk factor for that person to get lung cancer because all of that smoke will help them to actually get sicker. It's not going to make them healthier. Obesity is another risk factor for heart disease. D, biological material. So biological materials are any type of unsterilized specimens of human or animal tissue. So anything that comes from the body. like blood, body discharges, fluids, excretions, or anything that's similar like that. And it can contain some type of etiologic agent. Etiologic agent, what does that mean? Well, an etiologic agent is any microbial toxin or microorganism that can cause disease. So any small little microorganism that can cause disease, and it comes from the body of an animal or person, that's biological material. Letter E is a chemical or biological accident. So an accident means that something was not done on purpose, and it's the unintentional release of one or more hazardous substances that can harm you as a person or can harm the environment. This can include things like fires, explosions, leakages, releasing of toxins or poisons, or any hazardous materials that can cause people to get sick, that can hurt them, or that can cause them to have a disability like blindness. This can occur naturally, or it can occur in human-made sources. So F is a chemical or biological incident. So this is a little bit different than an accident. An incident usually is something more general. Oh, there was an incident that happened, a biological incident. An accident is something that is never done on purpose. So an incident can be something that's can be a big event, it can be a small event, it can be good or it can be bad, it can be on purpose or it can be accidental. So accidents are always unintentional. They usually refer to some type of damage or injury, whereas an incident can be something that is done on purpose or it can be an accident. So a biological or chemical incident can include an accident, but it's not always an accident. Letter G is pathogen. Pathogen is basically just a fancy type of word, for a fancy medical word for anything that's a bacterium, a virus, or any other type of small microorganism that can get you sick. Lots of times you might hear that people call them infectious agents or simply germs. So a pathogen is almost the same as a germ. And letter H is aerosols. Now, the general term of an aerosol basically means any suspension or anything that stays in the air of solid or liquid particles and like a gas. Aerosol is, the word aerosol is an abbreviation of two words, aero and solution. So natural aerosols that you find in nature can be smoke, fog, or mist. Those are aerosols. But you can see in the picture there, someone is sneezing. And that sneeze lingers in the air, suspended, liquid particles of gas. So sneezes are also a type of aerosol. Letter I is PPE. And PPE is just an abbreviation for personal protective equipment. People say PPE because it's a lot easier to say that than instead of always going around, hey, are you wearing personal protective equipment? Yes, I am using my personal protective equipment. It's a mouthful. So they just call it PPE. And this includes anything that protects your body from any type of injury or infection. This can be goggles, it can be helmets, or any other type of garb or clothes that protects you. And the hazards that it protects you from can be physical, it can be electrical, heat from chemicals, from biohazards, or from anything in the air also. So number 2 is describe which PPEs are used by health professionals and what are they for. And so what do you guys think might be some PPE that different health professionals can use? Go ahead and make some comments there. What do you think different health professionals use as PPE?
It's we have a question, and now let's just find the answer from our amazing Pathfinders. Also, just to let you know, guys, that if you can't keep up with the things, don't worry. This is all going to be recorded and also be on, or we'll post it on YouTube so that you can catch up. In
right.
So people are writing down. They're saying it's mask, mask, gloves,
Okay.
also aprons, goggles. That is what our Pathfinders are saying.
That's right. Very good. So all of those are actually good things that are PPE used by health professionals. I have here just some examples. You can see a picture there of safety goggles, a lab coat, some gloves, wearing long pants, making sure that you're wearing shoes that are closed-toed, not sandals. And what are these things for? So gloves, they prevent, obviously, from getting chemicals or pathogens onto your hands. A face mask is to cover your nose and your mouth to make sure that you're lessening the risk of actually inhaling a type of airborne pathogens and also not infecting other people by breathing on them. A face shield is something like usually made of glass or plastic that covers the entire face. So you'll have the face mask, and on top of that, they'll put a face shield. It's what some health professionals will use. A gown or scrubs, someone said something like an apron. It's basically is what it is it covers the body. It goes on top of the clothes. So it's also covering and protecting your clothes from any type of diseases. A hazmat suit. This is a positive pressure personal suit, or PPPS. These are the maximum type of protection against any type of diseases or sicknesses. And they're usually used more in research laboratories, but sometimes some health professionals will use these when they're dealing with very contagious and very dangerous diseases. The second part of number 2 asks us to list at least 5 other non-healthcare fields that routinely use PPE for protection from biohazards and why they are needed. So when we think of PPE, most of the time we're thinking of people like nurses, doctors, people that deal with diseases and health. But there are other types of professions that also use PPE. What are some professions that you guys can think of, just right off the top of your head, that would need to protect themselves from any type of environmental thing? What other types of jobs or people working would use PPE?
Some answers already started coming in. People are mentioning at the moment nurses, some of the doctors at the moment, lab technicians, lab scientists. Some people mentioned a few other answers, which maybe not the most.
Okay, good. Well, I made a short list of some non-health professions. So you have people who work with sewage. That's very dirty stuff. It can get you sick. They use a lot of protective gear. You have people who work with waste management or garbage. They always, want to make sure that they're protected as well. People who clean in different places, people who might clean the streets, people who might clean rooms. Law enforcement, police officers usually wear some type of protective equipment. Firefighters, you're not going to go into a fire without protecting yourself. People who work with agriculture, vets that work with animals, people in manufacturing, coroners, property management, food preparation. You want to make sure that people who are making your food at least are wearing some type of gloves, right? Laboratories, hazmat operations, even correctional facilities like jails and prisons. And so PPE is not just for health professionals, but for all other types of professions, they can use it also. So number 3, differentiate between outbreak, epidemic, pandemic, and endemic. Whoa, a lot of these words sound very similar, right? What is the difference between these things? So let's go ahead and look at the first one, an outbreak. So an outbreak basically refers to a number of cases of a disease that exceeds what would be expected. For example, if there's some new sickness and I'm a doctor and I think that I'm gonna get 5 people coming into my office with this new disease. And instead of 5 people, I get 50 people. Well, that's an outbreak because it's exceeding how many people I thought that would get sick. That's known as an outbreak. An endemic is any type of disease that exists permanently in a particular region or population. So for example, malaria is a constant worry in parts of Africa. It is endemic to parts of Africa. So if you ever want to go visit there, you have to be aware that malaria you can get sick from malaria from different places that you go and visit there because it is endemic. An epidemic is an outbreak of a disease that is actively spreading over a wide geographic area. So basically, this is a sickness that is actively getting lots of people sick in a specific area. And so an epidemic, an example, a very good one is what we're going through, was the COVID-19 or the coronavirus. It started in a certain place and it started spreading. So that became, instead of an outbreak, an epidemic. A pandemic is basically a global endemic or epidemic. So this is basically the same disease that now is starting to spread, not in just one area, but throughout a country or throughout the entire world, very much like COVID-19 has been doing over these past few months. So here's kind of a good example of the differences of these words. An endemic, you can see, it's just a particular disease in certain areas or regions. An epidemic is that one disease spreading out over one particular area, and a pandemic is the same disease spreading out all over the place. It's not just contained in one area. So the second part of number 3 is to make a Venn diagram, or to make a chart that shows the things that are the same and those that are different in these words that we just looked at. There in your worksheet, I included a Venn diagram, which is 2 circles that are connecting. Really, you should probably have 3 circles. Excuse me, because we have more than just 2 words. But here's an example that you guys can start off, and hopefully you guys can expand on it. So on the left side, we have what a pandemic is. It affects a larger number of people. It spreads across a larger region. There are higher deaths. There's economic loss. And all the way to the right, we have what an epidemic is. It affects a smaller number of people. It spreads across just a small region and affects more people than you would expect under normal conditions. And then in the middle of that Venn diagram, you have what the similarities are between the pandemic and an epidemic. So both of them is a spread of a disease or an infection at an unusually large scale. And both of them are talking about one type of disease or the same infectious disease. So number 4, we're going to make a list of different precautions or things that we can do that should be taken during an epidemic and a pandemic. Probably at the beginning of this year, 2020, in January, we might have not known too much of what type of list we needed to make for precautions. But I'm sure nowadays you guys know a lot about what we should do to make sure that we're safe. Give me some examples. What are some things that we can do to make sure that we don't get sick so easily during an epidemic or a pandemic?
Alrighty, we have a lot of answers coming in already, and maybe you can see some of them. Majority people are saying, well, we should wash hands, social distancing, gloves, wear mask, and so that is what majority of answers are saying at the moment.
Good. All of those are right. I have a small list here. You guys can always add to it. You guys mentioned frequent hand washing. You want to avoid touching your face because we use our hands to grab things and we might get germs on them. And then if we're suddenly rubbing our eyes or putting our hands in our mouth, we can get that disease that was on our hands. We want to disinfect everything that we can using types of disinfection sprays or wiping surfaces down. We want to use social distancing. At the beginning of this year, we probably didn't know what that meant, but now I'm sure many of us know exactly what that means. We want to wear face masks. We want to treat the water that we're drinking, or we want to make sure it's treated, maybe using filters. And if you're in a place that you can get sick by mosquitoes, for example, malaria, malaria is spread by mosquitoes. You want to make sure that you can control that by using either some type of mosquito spray. Lots of places use nets over their beds when they're sleeping so that mosquitoes can't get into them. You guys had very good answers, and here's just also a small list of different things that we can do. So number 5, chart, list, or illustrate the differences between isolation and quarantine. Well, those 2 words sound very similar. What is the difference between isolation and quarantine? Well, the first one is an isolation. And basically, isolation means that you're separating sick people with a contagious disease from people who are not sick. So in hospitals, usually they will isolate a patient that they know that has an infectious disease. They will put them in a separate room, and only specific people can go into that room using the protection that they need. If someone is sick at your home and they're going to isolate, they'll want to be in a separate bedroom, and you'll only want to go in there at specific times. one of the easiest way to complete this requirement is to illustrate it. So many of you are coming off the drawing honor. If you still have that piece of paper, you can illustrate it kind of like I did here. Isolation is taking that sick person, like that poor girl there in the middle. You're going to draw something around her as if she were in a room, and there's people outside of that room. So she is isolated from those other persons until she gets better. Quarantine, on the other hand, means separating and restricting the movement of people that have some type of disease or might be at risk of getting that disease. Many of us are very familiar now with exactly what quarantining is. And basically, quarantining is to help limit the spread of different diseases. And staying at home and away from other people for at least 14 days. I want you guys to remember that number, at least 14 days. It's going to come in real handy later on. So if you want to illustrate it, here's an example also of people that are quarantining. They're at home, they're doing everyday things, but they're staying at home and they're not coming into contact with other people at the same time. So number 6, we're going to choose 2 of the following historic diseases, and we're going to answer these things. When did it occur? How many were infected? How was it spread? What were the symptoms? What were the biosafety precautions used, and how was it abated? You should have a worksheet there that has different columns with all these questions already. So I'm just going to go through the different diseases, and you're going to fill in the answers as you hear them or as you see them. So we can choose 2 of this list: smallpox, typhus, 1918 influenza, also known as the Spanish flu, polio, or swine flu. I chose 2 for us already that we're going to cover, but I highly recommend and encourage you to go back afterwards and look up the rest of these diseases. It's very interesting to learn how the world dealt with these. So the first one that we're going to go through is the Spanish flu, or also known as the 1918 flu. So when did it occur? Right in the year, that's in the name, in 1918. It's also known as the Spanish flu, although I'm not sure why, because it didn't start in Spain. But that's the way it's known nowadays. It occurred from January 1918 all the way to December 1920, for a complete 2 years, and it affected about 500 million people. So how did this spread? 1918 to 1920, the world was in a war known as World War I, and there in Europe, they were actively fighting off the bad guys. So during that time, the soldiers, they were moving a lot and staying in closed quarters, and they probably weren't eating as much either because they were always out in the field, or the rations and the food didn't get to them on time. So their immune systems and their bodies were probably weakened. So it was easier for them to get sick. And then they were in close quarters with other soldiers, and they would get infected and they would get sick. And then in that time, transportation was becoming a lot easier. Planes had been invented, and there was a large railroad or train system. So if you were sick and you were infecting other people, you were going by plane or by train suddenly very far to different places that had been almost impossible to get to in a short amount of time before that. So what were some of the symptoms of the Spanish flu? Well, the typical symptoms were the same as almost any type of flu that you would expect. You would get things like chills, fevers, you would become fatigued or very tired. So when this flu hit, doctors and scientists, they didn't know what caused it. They didn't know how to treat it. Back then, they didn't have the drugs or the vaccines that we have today. So what some people would do is the officials in some communities, they would impose quarantines. They would tell citizens to wear face masks. They would shut down public places, including schools, churches, and theaters. Does that sound familiar? Kind of like what we went through this year, right? According to the New York Times, which is a newspaper here in the United States, during the Spanish flu pandemic, Boy Scouts in New York City, they would see people that were spitting on the street. That was very common back in those days. They would just spit on the street. And the Boy Scouts would go up right to them and give them a card that would say, "You are in violation of the sanitary code." Basically just a nice way to say, hey, don't be spreading your germs around. And so back then, the Boy Scouts were trying to help with this pandemic, as today, we, the Pathfinders, many of our clubs around the world have been trying to help people around the world, they stay safe and stay healthy. So here in the picture we have, these are Japanese women who are trying to also not get sick with the 1918 flu. There was a second wave that struck, but after that second wave, the new cases just suddenly dropped. You didn't hear too much more about people getting sick. And there are different theories as to why. We don't know exactly why, but one explanation is that the Spanish flu virus probably morphed or mutated into some type of virus that wasn't as lethal or didn't kill as many people. And this usually happens with lots of different flu strains. They will mutate into a virus that is less lethal. And also by this time, a lot of people had contracted the virus and they had built up their immune systems if they had not died from it. They had gotten sick from it, and then their body was able to fight it off. So we're going to go on to the second one. The first one that we studied was the Spanish flu. And the second one that I decided to go ahead and learn about is known as the swine flu, or it can also be known as H1N1. This one is a little bit more recent. It began in January 2009. So from April 12, 2009 to about April 10, 2010, that year, it's estimated that about 700 million to 1.4 billion people contracted this illness. And that is absolutely a lot more than those who had the Spanish flu. So how did it spread? Some people think that it spread in the same way that any type of seasonal flu spreads, usually by people coughing, by people sneezing, or talking to others that have the flu. Sometimes just by touching a surface, and then someone else touching that same surface, they could contract the disease. So what are some signs and symptoms of the swine flu? Well, basically almost the same as any other type of flu. You might get a fever, not always. You could have chills, you could be coughing, you could have a sore throat, runny or stuffy nose, your eyes might get watery or red, your body might ache, you could have headaches, any normal symptom of the flu. So the best way that you can prevent the swine flu is to get a yearly flu vaccination. That will help you prevent or be at less risk to get any type of flu. Other ways are to always be washing your hands with soap or hand sanitizer. Don't touch your face like we had said before. And the virus can survive on different surfaces like telephones or tabletops. So you want to make sure that you can sanitize other things as well. So how did the swine flu, how was it abated? Well, in August 10, 2010, WHO, it's a World Health Organization, they declared an end to the global pandemic. However, the H1N1 virus, or the swine flu, can continue to circulate still today as a seasonal flu, and it can cause illness or hospitalization and even some deaths. So we want to make sure that we're always taking care of ourselves and make sure that we don't get the swine flu or any other type of flu or disease. Number 7, we're going to choose 2 diseases, kind of like we did before, but this one's a little bit different. We're going to ask again, what are the symptoms? How is it spread? We want to know, is there a cure today? And where and when was there an outbreak or epidemic or pandemic? And is there a prevention for this disease? And what are some biohazard safety methods that we can use to combat the spread of this disease? We have a different list now. We can choose from cholera, tuberculosis, yellow fever, measles, malaria, Ebola, AIDS, or COVID-19. I think many of you might be experts on COVID-19, so I didn't choose that one. I, again, recommend for you guys to go ahead and look at all of these later on, but I chose 2 for us to go ahead and study. And the first one is Ebola. Ebola is a virus that is still spread today, and symptoms of having Ebola is usually, they usually appear after 8 to 10 days that you get sick with the virus. But they can appear as soon as 2 days, or they can appear after 21 days. And the symptoms usually start off with what are called dry symptoms. This can include fever, aches and pains, or fatigue. And then the dry symptoms go on to wet symptoms. So you can have things like diarrhea or vomiting. It's not a very fun disease to have. Usually with people that have Ebola, they'll show things like fever, they'll have headaches, body aches, they might have stomach pains, or they'll have unexplained hemorrhaging, bleeding, or bruising. It's a horrible disease to have. So how is it spread? Well, Ebola can be spread from infected fruit bats or monkeys to people. And there in the picture, you can see that some people hunt bats and monkeys and they eat them as food. The Bible gives us a very good list of the types of meats that we can eat. And I'm pretty certain that bats and monkeys are not included in there. That some people eat those things and they can get sick from eating those types of things. Right now, there is no known cure for the Ebola virus as of 2020. And just a little known fact, technically there is no cure for any type of virus in the world. We have things that can help people that are sick and treat the symptoms, but to destroy a virus, we still don't know how to do that. So if you ever get any virus, that virus stays inside your body the entire time. Your body just learns how to fight it off, so you don't get sick from it anymore. So Ebola is the same, it's a virus, and we don't know of any cure that will destroy Ebola. Usually we just treat the symptoms and we hope that the person will, their body and their immune system will learn how to fight off that virus. So the largest outbreak of Ebola as of this year was in West Africa, known as the Zaire strain. And there were over 28,600 cases. And right now in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, there's an ongoing case that began last year. And right now it's just ravaging that country. There is a vaccine for the Zaire Ebola virus, and it was approved just last year. So you want to eliminate any contact with bodily fluids of anyone who has Ebola. You want to make sure that you disinfect tools, tables, clothing, or any bedding that might have touched that fluid so that you don't contract that disease either. And you want to use PPE, gloves, gowns. You want to make sure that you're sterilizing things. These are all things that clinicians that are dealing with Ebola, they will use. So we're going to go ahead and go on to our second disease that we're going to talk about. And this one I chose to talk about AIDS. AIDS was a very big concern back in the 1980s and the 1990s. It's still a big concern today. So there's lots of symptoms that are associated with AIDS or with HIV. HIV is the virus that can give you AIDS. So some symptoms can include rapid weight loss. You'll lose a lot of weight. You might have fever, or you might sweat a lot at night. They're called night sweats. You might have extreme and unexplained tiredness, swelling in the armpits, in your throat, or in your groin, diarrhea that lasts more than a week. That's horrible. You might have sores on your mouth, or on your genitals, on your anus. You might have pneumonia, red, brown, pink, or purplish blotches on or under the skin. And you might have also memory loss. You might go into a depression, and you might get other neurological disorders. Now, each of these symptoms can be related to other types of illnesses. So the only way to really know that you have HIV is to go and get tested for it. Now, AIDS, what AIDS does on HIV is that it attacks the immune system. You have white blood cells, which are like soldiers that fight off any disease inside your body. And HIV, what it does is it attacks the white blood cells. So it attacks the soldiers. So people who have AIDS, have died from AIDS, don't die exactly from HIV, but they die from another disease that will infect your body, like pneumonia, because you have no more soldiers left. You have no more white blood cells that can fight off that disease. So many of the severe symptoms and illnesses come from opportunistic infections, and that they will take advantage that your body doesn't have an immune system anymore, and people will get sick and die from those other diseases, which AIDS helped them to get. So you can only get HIV by coming into direct contact with certain bodily fluids, things like blood, things like semen or preseminal fluid, rectal fluids, vaginal fluids, or even breast milk. You cannot get HIV from air or water. You can't get them from mosquitoes or ticks or any other insects. You can't get it from saliva, tears, or sweat that's not mixed with the blood of someone else who has HIV. You can't get HIV by shaking hands, hugging, sharing toilets or plates, silverware, or even drinking glasses. You can't get HIV from kissing either, or social kissing. You can't get it from drinking fountains. You can only get it from those specific bodily fluids that we had mentioned previously. So at this time, there's no cure for HIV. Like I said, there's nothing that destroys viruses. But there are medications that are highly effective in fighting it off and its complications. So the treatments usually are designed to help reduce the virus inside of your body and to keep your immune system as healthy as possible so that you don't develop as many complications that you can get. People think that HIV came from chimps and it went to humans in what is now known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This is probably because people, again, were eating monkeys or chimps. A very good reason to go vegetarian, in my personal opinion. So in the 1960s, how did it spread around the world? So in the Congo, it started there, and people from the country of Haiti went to the Congo, people who were doctors and tried to help with this epidemic there. And unfortunately, many of them got the disease also, and they brought it back to them through Haiti, and from there it spread throughout the Caribbean, and from there it spread throughout the Americas. And the same way that doctors went to help in Africa, and they went back to their home countries, that's how AIDS was spread in a long time. Here in the USA, it was discovered by people who had clusters of what's known as Kaposi sarcoma and pneumocystis pneumonia. Those are big fancy words for a disease. And they found these things mostly in homosexual men in large cities like Los Angeles, New York City, and San Francisco. So anyone can get HIV. But there are different things that you can do to make sure that you protect yourself. You can get tested to make sure that you don't have it. And as Christians, we are taught that we should wait until we are married before we have sex with someone else. And this is a good thing in many different reasons. But one is because you're only having relations with that one person. So you can get sick from different diseases that come from going to bed with lots of different people. And another way is to make sure that you don't inject drugs, especially drugs that are illegal or that are illicit. If you have to inject drugs because of some prescription that a doctor has given you, you want to make sure that your needle is sterilized and that you are never sharing needles with someone else. And some biohazard safety precautions that we can use. I just put a list here of what some laboratories that are working with HIV and with people with AIDS, these are some things that they do. And I thought it would be a good idea that we might copy some of these things. They want to make sure that they don't use syringes or needles. And whenever they use things to cut or like a needle, they will put it in a biohazard waste receptacle. They always protect their hands using different types of PPE like gloves. And they want to make sure that they are hand washing. Even when gloves have been worn, you always want to make sure that you wash your hands afterwards. And there's a generation of aerosols, droplets, splashes, and spills, anything like that, you need to avoid to make sure that you're not getting sick with these types of things. So let's go ahead and we're going to go on to number 8. So we're going to complete the following. Letter A is which of the previous diseases studied are or were endemic to your local area. So I put the list there of the diseases that we had studied. We have the older diseases of smallpox, typhus, and so on. We have the newer ones, cholera, tuberculosis, AIDS, or COVID-19. So I know that we have people from all over the world. What are some of these diseases that you see on the list that are endemic to your local area? Go ahead and write that down in the comments section.
Alrighty, so we are now waiting for the answers. There are a few questions about what happens with the people who have a chicken pox and they come back. Is that something that maybe is not okay? People are mentioning COVID-19, AIDS.
Okay, right.
Malaria.
Chicken pox is another type of virus that your body learns to fight off. So once you get chicken pox, it's very rare for you to get it again. In fact, when I was a small child, I got chicken pox also, and my family would bring my cousins over, rub them on me so that they could get chicken pox also, so they could get through it. But it's another type of virus. So yes, COVID-19, like some of you mentioned, actually what's endemic there to the UK and to Europe, most of these diseases have been endemic there. I know that cholera, tuberculosis was endemic there to many parts of Europe. In the past, also the 1918 flu, swine flu, and smallpox, all those things were endemic to that particular area. And if you are from another place besides Europe, you can also have some of these that are endemic to your particular area as well. So letter B, the second part, is which of the previous diseases are current travel concerns and what locations are greater risks to encounter them. So there we have the same list. If you want to travel and go somewhere, whether it's just to the next neighborhood or to a completely other country, which one of these diseases might be a concern for you? And what locations are at greater risk right now? So right now, obviously, the biggest disease that we have a concern is about COVID-19, the coronavirus, because we're still with that right now in this phase. We want to make sure that wherever we go, we are protecting ourselves from that. So different places around the world are at greater risk for some of these diseases. Like I had mentioned before, places in Africa are at greater risk for malaria. So if you want to go to Africa and visit there, make sure you know about malaria and other diseases there. And that comes to the third part of this question, C. Choose a place in the world you would potentially like to travel to and learn of the outbreaks and diseases that require or recommend a vaccine. I'm going to leave this as homework for you guys. Go somewhere. For example, I've always wanted to visit Brazil. If I want to go to Brazil, what types of outbreaks or diseases do they have there? And I'm going to learn what types of vaccines I should take, how I should protect myself, so that when I go on vacation to Brazil, I can enjoy it and not be sick the entire time. I'm going to leave that for homework for you guys. Number 9, how do vaccines work? And why is it important to be up to date with your immunizations? So a vaccine is basically medicine that's given by a medical professional. And what it does is they'll give you a lesser strain of whatever the disease might be. Like, for example, the flu vaccine will make it less likely that you get the flu. Lots of times we call this the flu shot, and vaccines are usually made from something that's alive or that was alive. And just a little trivia, the word vaccine comes from Latin. It's called vaccinus, or the word vaca, which means cow. I speak Spanish, and that's exactly how we say cow. We say vaca. So why do cows have anything to do with the word vaccine? Well, in 1796, Edward Jenner, he used cows infected with cowpox, and he used this vaccine to protect people against smallpox. So it started off with cows, so they used the word vaccine. The using vaccines is called vaccinations, and vaccines work because they train your body to fight off a potential disease. It's important to be up to date with your immunizations and with your vaccinations because they don't always last forever. Sometimes you need that extra oomph or they need to be boosted. So if you miss a part of a scheduled vaccinations, you might lose your immunity or partial immunity to that certain type of virus or bacteria that the vaccine was protecting you from. So number 10, name a national or global entity that assists in developing and applying disease prevention and control. Where is it located and what information does it relay and why is it important to know how to access that information? So I have 2 entities here. The first one is the WHO, and WHO is basically the World Health Organization. It's a specialized agency from the United Nations, the UN, that's responsible for international public health. It's currently located in Geneva, Switzerland, and they work to collect data and regional, state, national, and global sources and data points to track any diseases or situations that could affect public health. And you can get more information there on the website, on their website. It's www.who.int for international. Another one there in Europe is the ECDC, which is short for the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control. And this is controlled by the EU. As far as I know right now, the UK will still be using ECDC until the end of this year, December 2020. After that, once the UK gets out of the EU, I'm not sure what they'll do. But the ECDC was established in 2004, and it's located in Solna, Sweden. Number 11, explain why it's so important to remove medical gloves properly. Well, your skin is the biggest organ that you have, and it acts as a barrier for the rest of your body against diseases. So even though your skin helps, you still need a little bit more help using gloves. So why is it important to make sure that you take them off correctly? It's so that whatever was on your glove before, you don't get on your skin. And here's a small graphic of exactly how you should take it off. You want to first take off the lower part. You're going to stretch it over. You're going to crumple it up into the hand that still has the glove on. And then with your other clean hand, you're just going to lift it up from the underside and again crumple it up, never touching the outside part. Number 11 is a really fun one. You're going to demonstrate the proper way to remove medical gloves without transferring pathogens from the gloves to your hands. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a simulated pathogen, and you can use anything like the products of glow germ, cooking oil, ketchup, syrup, paint, anything that you can visibly see on the gloves. You're going to spread them all over your gloves, and then you're going to remove your glove using the proper technique that I showed you on that graphic. You want to make sure that you don't get any of that ketchup or paint onto your hand. Once you do that, you throw away the gloves, and you clean up the mess. You want to do this to make sure that you don't get any of it on your hands. Here is a link to a video on YouTube of a nurse showing us exactly how to do this. I want you guys to go ahead and do this also as homework. Look at the video and get some gloves and fill them up with something and try to take off your gloves in such a way that you don't get that simulated pathogen onto your skin. Number 12, we're going to be talking about cleaning hands. So why is hand washing recommended rather than using hand sanitizer? Hand sanitizer, we've seen it all over the place now. But why is it better to wash your hands instead of using hand sanitizer? Well, when you really soil your hands or get them dirty, or get them greasy with things, hand sanitizer doesn't clean them off that well. Hand sanitizers also might not take off harmful chemicals, like things like pesticides or heavy metals from your hands. So it's always best to use soap and water to wash your hands instead of hand sanitizing. So what are the steps that should be taken to make sure that your hands are clean? And why is it important to follow each step? Here again, I provided you guys with a link on YouTube. This was developed by the WHO, and they show exactly how you should wash your hands. But I went ahead and made a summary of the steps. Basically, the first one is you want to make sure that you are wetting your hands. You want to make sure you have enough soap. You rub them on the palms of your hands, and then you're going to rub them also in between your fingers. And you're going to make sure that you rub the back side of your fingers and the back side of your hands also. And then you're going to rub your palms as well. And you'll wash them off. You'll take a paper towel. You'll clean your hands off. And then with that paper towel, you'll turn off the faucet as well. Letter C is, what song have you found that is long enough that you can sing it completely while scrubbing your hands? So normally, you should at least be scrubbing your hands for 20 seconds. It can be anywhere from 40 seconds to 60 seconds. But how long you're doing it is really not as important as when you are actually following every single step. But it's also a good reminder to at least do it for at least 20 seconds. So there are plenty of songs that last for about 20 seconds, but one of my favorite songs is the Pathfinder song. So if you start washing your hands and go through every step, and you start singing, "Oh, we are the Pathfinder strong." By the time you get to the end of it, you should have gone through all the steps, and you should have very good and very clean hands. Letter D is, why is the use of paper towels preferable over to cloth towels that can be used several times? Well, paper towels are disposable. So whenever you dry your hands with a paper towel, all you do is crumple it up and you throw it away. So whatever germs are left there are in the trash now. Whereas cloth towels, you'll use them and you usually hang them up to dry, and those germs are still there. And when someone else comes in, or when you come in later to wash your hands and dry them, now you're spreading all those previous germs onto your hands. Letter E is, you're going to make a video or a presentation to demonstrate to your instructor how and to properly wash and dry your hands. So this is homework for you guys. Make a video or presentation and show your instructor how to wash and dry your hands properly. Number 13, Talking about hand sanitizer, why is 70% isopropyl alcohol the most effective concentration as the main cleansing sanitizer? Well, 70% alcohol is the best one because the alcohol evaporates from your hands. If you use 100% alcohol, it's going to evaporate very quickly. So it won't be on your hands enough time to actually work and try and get rid of those germs. But 70% can do that. It will stay long enough and it will evaporate after killing those microbes. So what's the correct way to use hand sanitizer? You want to put just a little bit, about a teaspoon. You're going to rub your hands together all over, just like if you were washing your hands. You're not going to wipe your hands dry. You're just going to let the alcohol or the hand sanitizer evaporate, and this will disinfect your hands. When is it appropriate to use hand sanitizer instead of soap and water? Well, whenever you don't have soap and water. So if you're out on a camp out with your club, and you don't have access to running water or soap yet, you can use hand sanitizer in the meantime until you can actually go somewhere and use soap and water. Number 14, using face masks. What's the rationale for using a homemade face mask? Well, face masks lower your risk of infection. It's important that when you use a homemade face mask, this alone, it's not going to guarantee protection, but it's very effective when you combine it using other precautions like hand washing or social distancing. Letter B, learn how to improvise a face mask using materials commonly found around your home. And here's a YouTube link. The address is there, but I want to show you guys, this is the Surgeon General over here in the US, and he's going to show us more or less how you can make a face mask using your materials. There's no sound. I'll just explain it to you. He's going to use a t-shirt, and what he's going to do is he's going to fold it one half into the middle and the other side to the middle, and then he's going to take that other half again and fold it there to the middle, and again he's going to fold it back, and he's going to take two rubber bands, put them on one side, and he'll put the other rubber band on the other side, and he'll fold those flaps inside, and he'll put it right up. And you can just put those rubber bands around your ears, and there you have an improvised home face mask that you can use. Letter C is research and make a face mask using ideal fabric or design per instructions. So for homework, you guys are going to make your own face mask, and you can find how to do this anywhere on the internet. I have a link there of some instructions of how you can make face masks, but if you find another one, you can use that. Go ahead and for homework, make your own face mask and follow it to the letter of the instructions. So under what conditions would it be advantageous, instead of using a homemade face mask, to use a certified commercial face mask? Well, if you work in the medical field, you have to wear the appropriate type of face mask. Can you imagine going to the doctor's office and he comes in with a t-shirt over his face? What would you think about that doctor? You want to make sure that that doctor or that nurse is using a commercially certified face mask. And this means that it offers more protection than a homemade face mask. Number 15, regarding coughing. Here's an experiment that you guys are going to do at home. Now I want you guys, we're just going to read it for you guys really quickly. You're going to put yourself 12 inches or 30 centimeters in front of a clean glass or mirror, and you're going to cough on it, a strong cough. And you're going to see how much of the droplets are on that window pane or that mirror after you've coughed on it. Then while you have the same distance, 30 centimeters, in front of the glass, you're going to use the crook of your arm or elbow, and you're going to cough. And you're going to compare how much of the droplets now are on that mirror or on that glass. You're going to repeat the exercise while wearing a face mask. You're going to cough on that same mirror, and you're going to see how much droplets are. They're going to clean it afterwards. So you're going to see, based on your observations, you're going to identify what actions should be taken when coughing or sneezing so that you avoid contaminating other people. So go ahead and do this as homework. Number 16, we're going to study the protocol that the Lord gave Moses concerning leprosy in the book of Leviticus 13, 1 through 46. And how do the social distancing and quarantine principles of this passage compare to modern recommendations? We're not going to read all of those 46 verses, but I do want to highlight a few, verses 4 and 5. So it says, but if the bright spot is white on the skin of his body and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and its hair has not turned white, then the priest shall isolate the one who has the sore for 7 days. And the priest shall examine him on the seventh day, and if indeed the sore appears to be as it was, and the sore has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall also isolate him another 7 days. Remember way back when we were studying about quarantine. Usually you want to quarantine for at least 14 days. That's what many health professionals and medical professionals are telling us. Well, back in Leviticus, in the Bible, it was already telling us the perfect number that we should at least quarantine for. 7 plus 7 is 14. So the Bible was telling us way back when, if you're going to quarantine, make sure that you're doing it at least for 14 days. And the last verse there, 46, it says, he shall be unclean all the days he has the sore and shall be unclean. He's unclean, shall dwell alone. His dwelling shall be outside of the camp. So according to Leviticus, some of the things that we can learn from quarantining and social distancing is that whenever we want to quarantine or we want to isolate, we want to be away from other people. And this is what the Bible is telling us. Number 17, according to Matthew 24, the verses 3 through 8, what does the Bible tell us about end-time diseases? Again, I want you guys to read it all on your own, but I just highlighted a few verses, and it says there, I'm going to read from the middle of that second paragraph, and it says, see that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet, for nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. So that word pestilence is another word for plague, or it can be a sickness or disease. So the Bible is telling us that in the end times, we will be full of many calamities, but there will also be diseases and illnesses. So we as Pathfinders need to make sure that we know what to do to guard ourselves and protect ourselves from these diseases. And the last requirement, number 18, according to 1 Corinthians 15, 51 through 58, and Revelation 21, 1 through 5, what will happen to sicknesses and diseases when we go to heaven? Again, read all of those on your own because they're very good and it's good to have them in context. But I'm just going to go through a few. In 1 Corinthians, I'm going to start reading from that quote there in the middle. O death, where is your sting? O Hades, where is your victory? The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is in the law. But thanks be to God, who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. When we get to heaven, what's going to happen to disease? Many times, people who are really sick, they'll die. The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. And when we get to heaven, will there be any more death? No, there will be no more sorrow, no more death. So people who have diseases here on earth, we won't get sick in heaven, and we won't die from diseases. And in Revelation, it tells us, I'm going to read from the sentence before that red part, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. There will be no diseases. There will be no more sicknesses. And I can't wait to get to heaven, where there will be no more sorrow, there will be no more sadness, there will be no more death. So still to do, remember at 8C, you want to identify a place that you want to travel to, and you want to identify the diseases or outbreaks that they have there that require a vaccine. Number 11, you're going to do the glove removing exercise with whatever fake pathogen. Number 12, letter E, you're going to make a video to demonstrate how to properly wash and dry your hands. 14C, you're going to make your own face mask. And number 15, you're going to do that coughing experiment. So that's biosafety in a nutshell. I'll go ahead and take this time for any questions or any comments that anyone might have.
Thank you, Jay, for this very well prepared honor and for so many informations. Many of us were just taking notes and trying to see how we can implement this as quickly as possible in our life. There was one question, but before we would just like to say a big thank you, Jay. So what I'm going to do is, if it's possible, stop sharing your screen, Jay. We would like to give you a big clap for your and thank you. So everybody, I just allow you to unmute yourself. So thank you so much, guys. Are you able to do that? Oh yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you.